Hello, and you're listening to Lost in Science. It is another episode thereof, and we are going to science you up big time. Joining me is the wonderful Kat. How are you?
I'm a little bit sneezy, but besides that, not too bad. Thanks, Chris. How are you?
I too am a little bit sneezy. I don't know if you can tell. I've got a bit of a blocked nose and probably sinuses and stuff like that. What could possibly be going on in Melbourne where we record at this time of year?
In springtime, yeah. What on earth could be going on? It's hay fever season, and so that's what I want to talk about today. What's causing those constant sneezes and wheezes and itches in the spring?
I hope this induces some itching in people. Like, often talking about itching will make people kind of feel that, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe it'll clear the air.
And will you have some good advice for us?
I've got a little bit of advice of what you can do to minimize hay fever if you're like us and suffer from it.
Yeah, cool. Because I am looking for advice. I have my own routine, but I'm always interested in useful advice.
Yeah. And what are you going to talk about?
Well, I am talking about something that, look, I think we're all aware of, but maybe you don't hear about that much anymore. A certain theory of everything that used to be big science news. So string theory, of course, you are aware of.
I have heard of it, yes.
Yeah. I will probably quiz you more on it later, so I don't want to
Oh, gosh.
Now. Yeah. No, it's fine, because I'm curious to know what people know about it. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about string theory. So, we've got a certain segment of our audience I know who loves this kind of fundamental physics stuff. But I suppose I'm talking more about, where's that today? Like, whatever happened to it? Why don't we hear about it so much anymore? What's the deal with it? Whatever happened to the theory of everything is my question. So, yes, if you're interested in answers to that, to everything, well, you've probably come to the wrong place because I don't have those answers for you.
42. That's just 42.
That's right. But apart from that, we will solve your
allergic rhinitis
symptoms, and we will probe the string. So on with the show.
Chris, I don't know about you, but at this time of year, I get a bit sneezy. Sounds like you get a little bit sneezy and blocked. It is definitely hay fever time. The pollen is in the air. Maybe love is in the air too, but definitely pollen is in the air. And a lot of people get allergies. So that's essentially what hay fever is. It is an allergic reaction to things in the environment. Often it's pollen that gets a bad rap, whether it's pollen from trees and grass or weeds. But hay fever actually is a little bit more of an umbrella term. It does include dust as well, allergic to dust from house dust and dust mites, as well as molds, so like fungal spores and things, and animal dander, like pet hair and fur and things. Some people get this all year round, and that's a little bit different. But it does often play up in the spring. Although something that I realized this year, a lot of people were talking about, the hay fever is so bad, And then I was like, is it? I barely had to take any antihistamines. And I remembered this year I'm immunocompromised.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it's just sort of interesting as someone who studies the immune system, and I hadn't sort of made that connection. And here we are. So I thought I would explain a little bit about what hay fever actually is. So essentially, your nose is like a filter. And the tiny hairs and the mucus that line your nasal passages, they trap dust and pollen and other tiny particles. And a person with hay fever is essentially allergic to some of those particles that get trapped in the nose. And really what's happening is your immune system is treating something that's pretty harmless, like pollen, as if it's dangerous and it's launching an attack. And then your nasal passages get inflamed and you produce a lot of mucus, which is why, Chris, your nose is blocked. So allergies like hay fever are caused by a type of antibody. If you've heard me talk, you know that I love antibodies, but it's an antibody called IgE. And each IgE antibody is very, very specific. It will target a specific thing, reacting against certain pollens and other things that people can be allergic to. So that's why if you have hay fever, you actually might not be allergic to like all pollen. It might be, a particular kind of grass or a particular tree pollen. But yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like you said, people do blame pollen, and people sort of pick on some plants in particular. Like I know that. Okay, let's look. Wattle, for instance, comes out in the start of spring, and so a lot of people kind of blame the wattle in Melbourne. People blame the
plane trees,
the plane trees.
Yeah, everyone blames that.
Yeah, but I understand the things. It can be hard to know what pollen it is, and as you said, like it could be dust mites, and they can be different in different seasons as well, those impacts.
Yeah, for sure. It is tricky to test. It's not tricky to test. It's just effort to test. And so you can go to a doctor and work through it with, a clinician. And what they'll do is they'll patch test you. So they'll draw little dots and circles on your arm and test, putting a little bit of each pollen into you and going, now, where do you go red? And that will sort of indicate which ones you're actually allergic to. So I do have a few friends who've gone through that process and they know exactly which pollen it is that they're allergic to. But otherwise, yeah, we tend to blame the ones that we can see, like wattle and plane trees. Like you can see stuff falling off the trees, and so it's very easy to just go, yeah, it's totally that.
Well, the plane trees, they have fairly big bits of flower, whatever. And regardless of whether you're allergic to them, they can get stuck in your respiratory passageways anyway. So yeah, that's not great. But yeah, I'm pretty certain for me it is grass pollen. So I also get skin reactions and those sort of things to exposure. So yeah.
Yeah, that will do it. Like there are some cases, like obviously with you and for me as well, when I sit on particular things, I start getting a bit itchy, and that can kind of be indicative. Maybe I'm allergic to this thing that I'm currently sitting on and reacting to. But essentially, when a susceptible person is exposed to whatever pollen or whatever thing it is that they're allergic to, their body starts producing a large number of those similar IgE antibodies that can specifically target it. And then, so the next time you're exposed, you've got this army of IgE antibodies that can respond. And so what they do is they bind to, for example, the pollen. I'm just going to pick on pollen because it's easy. So they'll bind to the pollen and signal to immune cells called mast cells. They're like, raise the mast, go, there's a thing, attack. And they'll release a chemical called histamine. And you might be familiar with this idea of histamine because as a solution to hay fever, you can take antihistamines. So histamines trigger inflammation in your airways, making you sneeze, making you all like mucusy. And antihistamines are essentially a way to clear up the histamine to reduce that inflammation.
Right, so this is not like something that's unique though to allergies. Is it like this sort of like, IgEs and mast cells and histamines? This is what happens when you get an actual immune attack as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends on what you're talking about because different people have different kinds of allergies to different things. For example, I'm allergic to sunscreen, and that's actually mediated by an entirely different kind of immune cell. So different people have different immune cells that are involved in their allergies. But when we're talking about hay fever in particular and a lot of these sorts of allergies to things in the air, usually we are talking about IgE and mast cells. Yeah. And I guess a big question is, why do some people have hay fever and other people don't? Because you see some people who are just, they're doing fine in spring. And it kind of is a little bit of a mix of genetics and your immunity and the environment. So genetic factors can play a role in terms of determining whether you're susceptible to get hay fever, and there certainly are family links showing that it is kind of heritable, but studies have sort of ranged or put the range from like 33% to 91% heritable. So there is quite a big range there in terms of accounting for like, is it the genes that determine whether you've got hay fever? But other theories relate to the hygiene hypothesis, which can sort of explain hay fever and other allergies in people with no family history. The idea being, we're too clean.
Mhm.
And so our immune systems aren't really learning how to regulate themselves well enough, or they're not trying to go down particular pathways. They're not sort of flexing their muscles, as it were. So it's sort of that combination of not really flexing certain muscles, or like not actual muscles, but certain pathways, and not learning as you're growing up how to control your immune system. That can kind
On,
of lead to it.
on the genetic side of things,
Hmm.
if you say got a history of hay fever in your family or that sort of things, does that make you more susceptible to other allergies as well?
Yeah, especially like skin allergies, eczema, and things like that. Yeah. And for different particular kinds of allergies, like food allergies as well, there certainly are heritable links for that, genetic links. But another big thing that can influence, I should say, the hygiene hypothesis doesn't just say, all right, let's just abandon being clean and good hygiene. It's more the overuse of hand
Yeah,
sanitizer
yeah,
and
yeah.
things like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
this
I was
isn't an
thinking,
excuse to stop washing your hands.
oh yeah, yeah, and I was thinking about like food allergies in particular. You know, how the recommendation is like exposure now to the
Yeah.
allergens early, and that's apparently is protective,
Mm.
but it's not 100% protective, as I know, because our child, you know, suddenly got allergic to egg one day after having been fed egg as a
Mm.
baby. So yeah, sometimes the exposure doesn't always beat the prevent the allergy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's a really good point. And something that's why I kind of said it's a mix of your genetics, your environmental factors, and all sorts of things. Because something you also have to be mindful of is irritation. So if there's lots of air pollution or tobacco smoke around you or other irritants, they can make you more susceptible to hay fever because perhaps like your nasal passages and your respiratory system are a little bit more damaged or inflamed already, making it easier for things like pollen to enter your body and trigger like a bigger allergic response. But in terms of if you get hay fever and you want to prevent it, checking the pollen count is a good place to start, because if it's going to be a high pollen day, you might want to like close those windows. Don't go outside for a bike ride and things like that. And you sort of want to stay inside where possible. Washing your hands regularly, because you don't want to be like, you know, especially before touching your face, you don't want to be potentially pushing lots of things that you might be allergic to towards your airways. Even wearing a face mask, like, you know, you wear your face mask for flu, cold COVID season. Keep wearing it for hay fever if you suffer from hay fever. Preemptive medication is something that a lot of people do as well. So taking antihistamines, and they can certainly help, but these all like don't stop you completely from having hay fever. And to truly stop having hay fever altogether, some people benefit from allergen immunotherapy. So that's kind of that idea of exposure that you were talking about, except a little bit more controlled. So it's very small doses that you're given, so your immune system can learn to be a little bit more tolerant to whatever pollen it is or whatever thing it is that you're allergic to, and your immune system kind of learns how to stop fighting it so much. But yeah, it's certainly something that we have to consider a lot more, because climate change seems to be making these allergies worse. I mean, climate change is bad enough, but in terms of the weather, climate change is also changing rain and weather patterns. It's leading to more climate extremes. And yeah, there's more and more research showing how climate change is giving rise to more opportunities for pollen to affect the lives of people with hay fever, because plants are growing and spreading their pollen for longer. We're getting like thunderstorm asthma warnings now. Yeah. So just take care out there.
And save the world and save your nose.
Yeah.
I think we're lost.
We're not lost.
Not even any short-range radio signals yet?
Except for a single, very powerful radio emission.
Of course, a transmitter of that sort isn't exactly standard equipment.
Science and technology must be absolutely mind-boggling.
Of course, it's mostly on the theoretical side.
Well, so far.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
Okay, yes, you are listening to Lost in Science, and look, the topic that I'm talking about today was actually, I got onto this inspired by the movie Megalopolis, the folly, Francis Ford Coppola's folly of a film, Megalopolis. Are you aware of this film, Kat?
I am not.
It's like 40 or 50 years in the making. It's been his kind of dream project. He's a famous film director, Francis Ford Coppola, and it is absolutely bananas. Look, it's not worth me attempting to explain what it's about. It's about Megalopolis, as the person I went and saw it with said. But there's a brief bit where they do mention string theory, this candidate fundamental theory of physics. And look, that doesn't make any sense in the context necessarily. I think it's kind of put in there to give an impression of meaningfulness and profound importance, which implies that whenever this film was shot, or that scene was shot, they still felt that string theory was something of weight, or at least for the audience. So, yeah, that made me wonder, where is string theory at, and what do people actually think of it these days? So, Kat, I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell me what you know about string theory and what it's for.
Is it the age-old question, how long is this piece of string? No, I've heard about it, but and heard of it, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is.
Okay, but do you know what it's meant to be, what it's meant to do?
It's sort of explain everything, right? As you said, it's sort of like a theory of everything. It's talking about the fundamental kind of building blocks of everything.
This is actually really interesting. So I know you are you're an accomplished science communicator, and because I've been looking at this question of what happened to string theory, and there's a lot has been said about it. Basically, the short answer is that it's not as active as it once was. And a lot of people are kind of angry that it was overhyped and gave the public the wrong impression of physics. But here's someone like yourself who works in the area of science communication and doesn't necessarily feel like you know a lot about it. You seem kind of unaffected by the hype, which is actually good news, I think.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Yeah, it means that, we're not going to have to get too angry at these people.
Well, I was just wondering, is it saying that I'm young or something? Like,
possibly. Look, I'll give a bit of a rundown, see if anything rings any bells. So, string theory, the basic concept is that your fundamental particles are not, in fact, particles. They are tiny pieces of string, normally loops of string, or they sometimes are little open strings. This theory was first developed in about the late 60s, early 70s, and it was developed to describe the strong nuclear force, which is the force that holds the nucleus of atoms together. That didn't turn out. There was another theory involving the quarks and gluons and things that hold them together that was much more successful. So, yeah, it was not applied to that. But then someone realized that this theory of strings could actually incorporate gravity at a quantum level, which is something that has been a puzzle of how to combine gravity and quantum mechanics. And so that's when people started to get excited that maybe this theory of these tiny strings could then be actually used to describe these fundamental particles and unite the various forces, including gravity, which is something that otherwise could not be done. So it basically could become a theory of everything in the sense of a theory of all the fundamental forces and particles of the universe. So not everything in the sense of you have an equation that will tell you the answer to everything like life, the universe and everything, but at the deepest level, it would explain how the universe works. So yeah, the question was then, how do you actually get from this concept of these fundamental strings to this theory of everything? And that was what the big puzzle was, and the big kind of I guess, quest in particle physics for the next 40 years or so. And it truly did dominate theoretical physics for a long time. Probably more, I would say, in the United States more than other countries, but the United States leads particle physics more. So back when I was studying particle physics here in Australia, of course, it was pretty clear that you could see that all the big names were over in America working on string theory. So whereas here on the other side of the world, we would work on other things unrelated to string theory because we didn't have that expertise. And frankly, they were doing all that work. So we'll just try and pick up the pieces on some other little ideas. But essentially all the big names, all the big work, what people thought was the big work, was being done in string theory. And there are a lot of books being written and published for popular science. And so it came to be this thing that a lot of people who are kind of, I suppose, amateur enthusiasts of physics became aware of and would talk about, would bail you up if they found out you're a physicist. They would talk to you about string theory. And it would get mentioned in movies and TV shows and things as this kind of mysterious thing that really no one really understood what it was. But yeah, it became kind of, I suppose, like a icon of physics in that sense. Had a few complications in that it didn't actually describe naturally the universe that we live in, which is not an inconsiderate problem.
What does it mean by, like, what do you mean by it doesn't naturally describe it? Does that mean like you kind of have to force meaning?
Yeah, you kind of have to force meaning. I mean, like I said, you're trying to describe all the fundamental forces, so you have to and fundamental particles, so you have to work out how to get all of them out of the theory. But also the theory worked better in, say, 11 dimensions of space-time, like in multiple dimensions.
Okay.
Usually I think 11 was the most common. There are the different versions of the theory. And so then you had to find ways of getting from 11-dimensional space-time down to 4-dimensional space-time, which is where we live. And so there's all these schemes where you could kind of fold up the additional dimensions into really tiny so that they're too small to be seen. Eventually started to merge. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, a lot of different ways you could combine these theories, and it started to look like there was never going to be a string theory that we could say this is how we're going to find the one that basically describes our universe. Then in 1995, a very brilliant physicist called Ed Witten, who's mostly unknown outside of this field, but within physics he is regarded as quite brilliant. In 1995 at a conference, he decided to surprise everyone by combining all the different string theories into one master theory called M theory. That basically combined everything. And at that point, everyone said, yes, we've done it. We have the ultimate theory. Once again, they thought that. But then it got even worse because how you get from this M theory again down to our universe became more complicated. It turns out there was a ludicrous number of ways you could kind of fold up these other dimensions or relax things down. I think a number I've seen about 10 to the power of 500 different kind of possibilities. Yeah, so it kind of got a bit worse in that sense. And so this is when they came up with something called the landscape concept, also known as the multiverse, in that you have basically this huge number of different universes, and we just happen to live in the one out of these 10 to the power of 500 in which our laws of physics and our kind of world and life can exist. Which is, one of the reasons why the multiverse is so popular now. People started writing books about that and popularizing that. And that became something that is driving now we see in pop culture. And this was a big thing. This actually nearly broke science, at least from the point of physics, because they started to say, because they had another problem at this time in that they had no experimental proof or experimental tests of this theory. And they basically said, well, look, essentially any universe is possible in our theory. So you can't actually test it because we can explain any experimental result. So therefore, we have the ultimate answer and you can't prove it wrong because we can explain anything. They started to argue basically that their theory was beyond the experimental tests. people actually were seriously putting forward this idea, which saying that we should stop doing experiments because we've solved it.
The answer, it's there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
However, people still did experiments, and some of the basic things that you would expect to happen if string theory was correct were not found at, say, the Large Hadron Collider. Particle physics stubbornly remained a theory of particles, very similar to how it was predicted 50 or so years ago. And gradually, I think over the last 10 or more years, interest in it as a fundamental theory has slowly faded away, mostly because of this failure of experiments. Even though they claimed they could explain any experiment, essentially their inability to do so made it kind of fade away. It's still used. It's produced some interesting concepts which are still being studied. Ideas between, dualities between different theories, that you can explain one theory by using a different theory in a different dimension, which I won't go into right now because we don't have time. The idea that quantum entanglement could be due to wormholes, these kind of things. There's these interesting ideas that came out of string theory that are still being explored, and some of the maths is useful in other areas. But generally, the enthusiasm has faded a lot, and some of the proponents of it, some of the founders of it, I've found interviews with them recently where they essentially seem to be disowning it to some extent, saying, I never said it was going to be a theory of everything. They've actually literally said that.
Wow.
I've seen interviews where they said that. Don't everyone got too carried away. And these people who basically wrote books saying, this is the theory of everything.
It kind of sounds like it was too complicated for its own good.
Look, one of the famous quotes was it was a theory of the 21st century that was dropped into the 20th century. Well, we're now in the 21st century, and it turns out that maybe it wasn't that either. So, look, I don't know. It was a bit too complicated. I think the thing for me, in terms of from a scientific point of view, it showed that, so the idea that you combine quantum mechanics and general relativity, it showed that was, for gravity, I should say, it showed that was possible, that there are theories that can do that, even if they turn out to be wrong, to be not the theory of our actual universe. It showed that it is possible in some way. So they give some hope to the idea that these problems could be solved in some way. It probably indicates that whatever is the answer is a concept we haven't even thought of yet, which is kind of, exciting to consider. But from the science communication point of view, I think people did get a bit excited about it and exaggerated things. And even though it hasn't made a huge impact on the rest of the world, I think there are some lessons in there for science in general to not overhype and oversell what you're doing. Because eventually people are going to find you out if you're making it up. And look, we all want to look good, but it's best to keep in touch with reality, I guess.
And that is all we have time for this week on Lost in Science. Thank you for joining us in Getting Lost. If you have any questions or suggestions for the team, get in touch with us by email. We are lostinsci@gmail.com. You can send cheap tweets to us at lostinscience1 on Twitter, or you can find us on the ubiquitous Facebook. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne on the land of the Kulin Nation and is broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find a podcast version of the show on 3cr.org.au, or you can tune in the way you did this week when we return in our usual time slot to get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.